Hello everybody, welcome to this week's Vilo Sky's homeschooling drop-in. I'm Vicky Zudrin, I'm the co-founder and director of Vilo Sky. We're a social enterprise that work towards creating inclusive workplace cultures, and recently we've been very much focusing on working parents, which is definitely an area that we believe facilitates greater things like gender equality and mental health, just in general, let alone homeschooling times, but with us being where we are currently with the schools being closed, it's definitely an area that we personally are struggling with, and think that it is beneficial for us just to have a bit of time away from the kids and some space to talk about some of the challenges that we're facing, but also hopefully to work through some of the solutions together, and just think a bit further past homeschooling and what might be coming afterwards. So the format of these sessions, the way that we tend to run them between Ailsa and myself, who I'll introduce you to in a second, is we start with a little bit of our wins and frustrations of the week, and I'll let Ailsa go first with hers this week. And then we talk about our hot topic of the week, and this week we're focusing on careers and homeschooling. So very much about how the impact that, I guess, the last year, really, I mean, it's not just the recent lockdown, but COVID, homeschooling is having on career progression, and the disproportionate impacts that may be having on women's careers in particular as well. I'm sort of keen that we talk through that and think about all the variants that surround that as well. So from my perspective, I have two children. I've got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old who are hopefully still playing out in the snow, so that they're quite well occupied, but thank goodness for the snow this week. And Ailsa, would you like to pick up the reins and introduce yourself and go straight on to your wins and frustrations?
Sure. My name is Ailsa Clark. I've been a teacher for 16 years. Started off secondary, but now I have primary kids that I teach as well. So I teach from ages 5 to 18. I have one child who is 8 years old. He has additional needs. And yeah, so my job now, I do private teaching. So I kind of work around my son when he's in school, and more so like everyone else when he's at home at the moment. And I work around my husband's timetable. He's also a teacher. With regard to this week's wins and frustrations, well, one of the week is getting out. So I'm on the west coast. I'm on an island on the west coast of Scotland at the moment. We have no snow. It is bitterly, bitterly cold, and we're about to have no water because of it, because we don't have mains water here. So I guess that would be my frustration of the week, that I'm going to have to go and dismantle a pump and rebuild it to get the water working again. Island life. And my win of the week is just getting out, because last week the weather was so bad that a real case of cabin fever had set in. And getting out and walking with the wee guy, I think, has saved our sanity this week. It is midterm, school holiday. We're still doing a little bit of kind of informal stuff in the morning, but it's just been lovely not to have that pressure every day. So major win there too. What about you, Vicky?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would echo that win 100%. I mean, I think this week has just felt so much better with the kids being on half term in Edinburgh, which is where I am. But I mean, they're still here, so the kids are still around, and I still think that, like, I'm very aware that we need to be doing stuff with them, but they're playing out in the snow, they can do that on their own, which is good. Yeah, I think it's a win to not feel as stressed this week. Definite win. From a frustration perspective, I think it's just frustrating in the nicest possible way, but to still have them here and to still be having to juggle. And it has reminded me of like not homeschooling times, like just the general struggle, like when half-term holidays come up. The February one always comes up quite quickly after Christmas for us here. So I always remember being taken by surprise with it, and I not being able to take time off work with them, I think, is quite frustrating. Maybe this year we could have been a bit better planned with it and used our holidays in a different way, but I would quite like to have more time with them this week. So that's perhaps just been the frustration. So a win not to have to do the homeschooling, but balanced with the frustration of not actually being able to spend that quality time with them when they're not stressed with homeschooling as well. So yeah, I think it's just very different this week. I'm anxious about next week when they go back to homeschooling again, and then hopefully the week after that, my youngest will be back at school anyway. So we'll see
Is
how.
that going to make a difference for you? Is it going to make a difference for you just having your son at home?
I think that remains to be seen. I think so. The burden, oh, that's terrible. Feels like a terrible word, but the burden of homeschooling always did feel with Dexter, my oldest, which is, I think, added a layer of guilt because I always felt like we were neglecting my youngest.
Yeah.
I think that's been a thread that we've heard a couple of times from other parents as well. So at least it will take away the guilt of worrying about Isla, and like I know that she'll be taken care of, but it won't take away the pressure of still having to get the work done with Dexter. Confession time, like last week, we didn't hand any work in that we needed to.
But from what you were saying, I think you'd reached saturation point last week, so that's probably a good call.
Yeah, we all reached saturation point, and it was definitely, I think, a necessary lowering of expectations. One of your tips from last week was just about lowering those expectations, and I think that was really helpful to just think through that mindset where you've got to be listening from a mental health perspective as well, how everybody is doing. And my son was struggling last week, I was struggling last week, so don't worry about it. Like, we didn't have to work in, we did do it, it's okay, and it's gone. I think we just move past it now. So yeah, I think it will be less guilt when Anna goes to school, but I'm not sure about less pressure from a time management perspective. Just one thing to call out to people who are with us live at the moment: if there's any questions that you want to put in, or you would like to join in the conversation at any point on the chat, then please do feel free to do so. We'll keep an eye out on that as we go along. Yeah, we like to be as interactive as we can, but we're very keen to hear people's thoughts as we progress with our discussion as well. But I'm keen to dive into our topic of the week, which is just about homeschooling and careers. Because I think, Ailsa, from the last few weeks, and actually pre-homeschooling and pre-lockdown, it's a recurrent theme about the challenges of balancing a career and just being a parent, full stop. And not just homeschooling. I mean, it's got 1,000 times harder with homeschooling. But I'm really keen to just spend a bit of time exploring what we think that might be.
Some really interesting statistics have come up this week as well, particularly with regard to women. So
yeah, no, definitely. So I mean, what kind of things have you seen about it so far?
I do know that women have disproportionately taken on the burden, I would say, of homeschooling, looking after kids, running a house, as well as working. It was on the news the other night that the gender pay gap's actually going to increase.
Yeah.
Because they are more likely to have dropped their hours, or they're more likely to have asked to be furloughed. I think, and obviously it's not true of every single family because family circumstances are different, but there's a general trend towards women taking the foot off the gas with their careers in order to manage the kids at home.
Yeah.
So that's quite frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting conversation to have because like, we're in a two-parent household. My husband works full-time, the same as me. We're both being active with the children. There are definitely differences in our approaches. Like, he works in the study, shuts himself away. I'm downstairs working. So when we're all working in the same space, then obviously I'm more likely to get interrupted. And this is definitely something that I think has been said a few times about that interruption. But what that does for me means that I'm always edgy or vigilant or waiting to be interrupted. So from a stress perspective, that just adds a layer on. If you can shut yourself away and close yourself off and not be worried about that, I feel like I'm always tense waiting to be interrupted. And the kids do, because they're at home, and they want attention and they want to have you with them. They don't really understand why work is taking.
They can't understand, the kind of waiting.
Yeah.
The waiting aspect of it. Yeah. It's when you are in that situation, you can't give your work or your kids your full attention. You just feel, like you say, edgy. And when I'm certainly in that situation, I have to guard against feeling quite bad about my own abilities, that, you know, I can't do this and I can't do that and I'm not doing anything well enough. But, you know, one of the articles that I read this week, really, really good advice from a psychologist, is basically, you're not homeschooling. You have your kids at home and you're all trying to get through. You are not home working. You are trying to do the work you can from home. There's a huge difference in that, you know.
Yeah, so I think it's a lot to do with mindset. I think there's a massive.
Yeah, it's a lot to do with mindset. It's a lot to do with mindset. I think kids, if they will naturally gravitate towards mum, to ask her something, they will naturally gravitate towards mum when she's working. You know, they don't really understand that mum's at work when she's sitting in the same room.
So I was on a call yesterday with one of the senior leaders in my organisation, and I got both my son at one time yelling from another room, "Mummy, Mummy," like a rate of decibels, and I ignored him, but he just carried on because that's what they do.
Louder.
Yeah, that they have to eat, yeah. So then he stopped, he gave up, and then my daughter started from a different one, and I'm just listening to them and trying to listen to the call and trying to have this conversation. It was a one-to-one, so it wasn't like I could go on mute. And I think just when you have that, for the person who's on the other side as well, when we talk about all these embedded or unconscious biases, that's kind of where it's created from. There's more of a expectation that perhaps a woman would be distracted or interrupted than a man. I mean, I don't know what you think about that, if that's even fair. But when we're having these remote calls and stuff, I wonder if that influences what people think women are doing right now, or how they are able to balance it when we are getting that from the children, and they are perhaps more likely to want mum than dad. I mean, I don't know if I'm being fair with that. It's certainly what happens in our house.
Do you mean that you kind of presume that people have an unconscious bias when they see a woman on the screen, that she's going to be uninterrupted before the kids are actually going in the black?
Or that even just in general, not necessarily on that call, but just that it means while homeschooling that women are going to be less able to contribute to work than men, which when we think about it in terms of contributing to the career progression gap, whether that's true or not, whether, you know, other households where they're calling for dad more than mum, there's still that embedded view that won't be happening, and that dad is able to commit more than mum during this time. So when we come at the end of it, will there be an assumption that dads or men have done more work than women? More paid work, I mean. More
paid work, yeah, absolutely. I've got the statistics. Yeah, can contribute more to it. So I wrote down some of the stats today. You know, gender pay gap is going to increase, they reckon. They were talking also about, this is something that we didn't consider actually, just there, as single parents.
Yeah.
That is kind of increased even more with them, because 90% of them are women.
Yeah.
So I guess it depends.
There's a whole other bias.
It depends.
Single parents. I think that it's
single parents harder. Well, yeah, because things are much harder, because the burden of earning is only on their shoulders, and yet they have their child or children at home as well. I don't know if people think that women are more likely to be interrupted than men. I guess it depends on what kind of job you do. Yeah. Whether you are a kind of corporate or I think it's different in the kind of career that I have as teaching. there's not that much of a gender split until it comes to promotion. You know, until it comes to promotion.
In terms of the kids then, and I guess just with that, the way that the kids are at home right now and in that, is there anything that you suggest for supporting kids with understanding that parents are working at the same time that they're at home, and how to support them just when they can't have our attention?
I think it would depend on their age and stage. I mean, obviously, if you've got older kids, then they understand that cognitively. I think having a designated space for when you're working, not necessarily in another room, but even if you can change the layout of the living room a little bit. So this is mum's office space during the day, and we move the chair back at night, and it's just our living room. But this is my kind of kids pick up visually far faster than they pick up. I'm sure they're selectively deaf. You know, they'll forget something that you tell them, but if they can see it, quite often they'll remember it more. So I would say maybe change the layout of the living room so that you have your designated space and a schedule with them. Now, I don't want to say you impose a schedule on them, but if you sit down with them and you say, okay, this is what tomorrow is going to look like. Okay, I've got to work between this time and this time. So you've got a couple of these tasks to do. What do you want to do tomorrow? What can you do on your own tomorrow? So you sit down with them and you kind of plan that ahead of time, and you say to them, the younger kids, when mum goes into this chair here and she takes out her laptop or whatever, that's time for you to do the task that you want to do and can do on your own. And this is mum's working time. Now, obviously that wouldn't work with a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old because they're too small, but kind of early to mid-primary can probably get that. So visually different, I would say. And I would also talk to them about it when you are outside of the school and the work day, and be quite open with them and say, this is really tough for you and it's really tough for us at the moment as well. And how can we work through this together? Yeah. Because empathy is the kind of start of that. And if you understand their perspective and they understand yours, then things are going to be a lot smoother. And I think also when you're not working, make sure you have these kind of check-ins with them during the day. So I don't necessarily mean half an hour, but sit down and do a puzzle with them for 5 minutes if they're wee, just give them a cuddle, you know, just top them up if you like. Okay. So that you're still emotionally available.
Okay. Yeah, and I think certainly I've thought this myself before, like it's their house too. So it isn't, to the point you made earlier about we're not homeschoolers, we're being asked to support homeschooling right now, but the kids are outside of their schooling environment and they're at home. So they don't think that home is where we do work. So to them it's where we are the family. So it's a different, we're asking them to take on board an awful lot. Do you think that having a routine with them for those kind of check-ins helps, or to say, I don't know, I'm sure this is working for some people, but like I will make your lunch and that's time for us to sit down and have that sort of check-in every day?
It would depend on what tops your kid up, you know. So routine is good, routine and structure, particularly at this time when things are so unpredictable for all of us and there's that uncertainty. Generally kids thrive with routine and structure. So if your work hours are set, I know not everybody's can be, but if your working from home hours are set, at lunchtime I'll make you your favourite lunch and we'll sit and eat our lunch on the floor watching the telly, you know, it's something kind of fun, or we'll do a puzzle after lunch, or for little ones we'll come and snuggle up with me and we'll read a story together, or I don't know, with wee ones, you can be daft as well. You can have a dance party in your living room for 5 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
Just something that
I don't want to see my mummy dancing. It's I wouldn't know if I'd subject the kids to that, but yeah, I think that to that point I was making earlier as well about wanting to spend more time with them and being very aware that this week in particular when they're here that I've not done that. I think it is just finding that flex with work too, to be saying the priority this week has to be, I mean, it is all weeks with homeschooling and stuff, but really this week when there's no homeschooling routine either and the kids are in a play mindset because they're on holiday, actually being available to them to be playful this week is, it feels like it's more important to be able to do that with them, give them that break as well. Because we were, as you say, we were really getting to a very quite a stressful point last week, so it's been good to have this.
Well, it's great to be able to turn around to a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, whatever, and say, do you know what, I think we're both kind of scunnered with this now. You know, mum's feeling as if things are getting a bit hard, and I think you are as well. So why don't we do X, Y, and Z? Because that then takes the pressure off your child as well. They go, oh God, it's not just me that feels like this, you know, and then you come in, you give them a big cuddle or whatever tops them up.
So I just want to talk briefly. I'm very aware that we're just motoring through today's discussion. It's like flown by. But just in terms of some takeaway tools and tips, I will ask you for your top 3 tips in a minute, but just the balance right now. And I think across, mentioned about single parent families, I mean, it's there's no let up, and that's definitely something that I was finding from last week, which was really difficult. But that must be incredibly difficult if it's all on you. So there's recognition of that, and I think just to find that space to just have a bit of a break yourself away from it, in whatever way that could possibly be, and whether it is giving the kids something to do in a different room and they're just having time on your own and doing that compartmentalization. But for I guess for households where there is a man and a woman and a mum and a dad who are involved, which is a situation that we're in, it's really important for me as a woman who cares about her career to show my children that it's not just me who is juggling both right now. Like they didn't have to demonstrably see my partner taking part as a male and being involved in the children. And I think it's important for them to see that work matters for me as well. So there is that fine balance, because I feel very mentally, emotionally guilty and all those sort of things that happen when you feel you're not spending the time with the kids that they need to be distracted from work. But on the same time, I do very strongly feel that I'm an individual in our family too, and work does matter to me. So yeah, I think just some tips and things that for people who are watching or listening can take away, just in terms of balancing out the day across the people who are in the household, or to show the children that the situation we're in at the moment, like to role model, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Like, how do we role model ourselves as working parents for our children right now?
How do we role model ourselves as working parents? I think they need to see that they're important to us, and that our own mental health is important to us, and that the balance is important to us. And I would honestly be quite straightforward with them and say, I love my family and I love you and I will support you, but also I really enjoy my job and this is important to me too. So this time I have here to work, it's topping me up, if you like. And you know, it depends again what age and stage they're at, how much you can talk to them about that. I guess the historian in me would give a bit of a lecture about women and women's right to work. but I mean, in terms of structuring the day, every family is unique. in terms of who has to work when, and families find their own way of, if there are two parents, whether that be that's a mum and a dad, two dads, they find a way of juggling that, and I can't give them advice on that. But I would say that the handover needs to be quite clear. So I've spent this time with you this morning, and we've done X, Y, and Z. You've done really well with your schoolwork. We had a real laugh when we did this. You've had your lunch, fantastic. Now it's dad's shift. Mum's going to work, and kind of make it explicit to them in that way, so that they know that that is just as important to you as it is to your partner.
Sure. And I think as a parent, then it's for us to stick to that. I think that's a really good tip to say that, but then like for me not to nip my head out and go, everything okay, when I'm in the middle of a call.
Yeah, so there's also, I mean, a lot of it is communication. The foundation of it all is clear and consistent communication. But also, yes, and I'm particularly bad at not interfering.
Yeah, same.
when I can hear something going terribly wrong in the next room. Yeah, I mean, and sticking to it, having that self-discipline to say, I'm at work. If this was happening in another house, I would know it was happening. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay, I feel like this is a subject, I mean, it's such a complicated topic to be talking about, and we're perhaps a little bit in a frame of mind because we're on half term to be having this discussion right now. There's probably still in the middle of homeschooling. But if there's anybody who is listening right now who would like to ask a question, then feel free to pop it in the chat box. And while we're just waiting to see if any of those come through, Ailsa, I'll ask for your top 3 tips of the week.
3 tips of the week. Okay. Do you know what? You've actually preempted me. So top tip number 1 was routine and predictability. If you consider that these are calming to most people, and we are in a situation now where very little is predictable. So your home environment can be predictable, but your structure for the day or for the week is something that it would be better to create with your kids, to discuss it through with them beforehand. If they want to create pictures for visuals or whatever for a timetable, that's brilliant. If they don't need something as visual as that, also good. You'll know what works for your family. But build in opportunities for these emotional top-ups, build in opportunities for play, for exercise, for connection. And I would flag up, if you are the parent of teenagers, make sure that you are still giving that opportunity for connection, because they're very good at connecting to their phone and not necessarily communicating their needs in the same way as a younger child would. But teenagers, all research shows teenagers are pretty profoundly affected by lockdown, because they're cut off from their peer group, apart from kind of online, and worried about school. So check in on your teenager, I would say, even if they are lying in their bedroom on their phone all the time. Second one is just empathy and connection and communication. If your kid's kicking off, if they're more emotional than usual, if their behaviour is not what it usually is, allow space for that, unless they're tearing the wallpaper off the wall, obviously. Allow them to calm down and reconnect with them and understand what's going on, because they've got big feelings around this as well. Teach calming strategies to them. So whatever makes them calm. For my little guy, it's watching the fire. Other kids, it might be cuddling the dog. It might be doing something like that. But actually talk when they're in a calm frame of mind. Talk about what makes them calm and calms them down, so that when they are escalated or they're upset, they know what to do. They don't have to use that cognitive bit of their brain to think about it. And the third one, I actually hate the term because I hear it far too often, self-care. But find something that will give you a little bit of headspace, whether that is reading your book or going for a walk or talking to your pals or lying in a bath. But prioritise it. Almost put it at the top of your list. no matter how busy work is, no matter what you've got to do with the kids, if you're not healthy, nobody else will be healthy. So think of yourself and your own mental well-being first and foremost, I would say.
Yeah, and we always reiterate that, I think, every week, because it is so important right now, and it's going to continue to be important. At the end of the day, we're in a health pandemic, and there's a lot of stress and anxiety that's happening irrespective of homeschooling, so outside of that. So it's really important to just go a bit easy on ourselves, and recognize that we're all doing a fantastic job, which is always where I tend to leave it on in these sessions, which is to just remind ourselves that we are doing a fantastic job under very challenging circumstances. You mentioned it before, there is no right or wrong for anybody right now. I think that it's just to carry on doing the best we possibly can, and come along each week to get some support and just hear us talk and witter on about what's going on in our world at the time. But yeah, I think that just bear in mind that there is an end in sight as well. So we aren't going to be in this forever, and hopefully we'll get some more certainty next week as to when schools will be returning, and we'll start to be able to focus on that. So I can see that will be a focus for us next week. So I'm not seeing any questions come through. Yeah, we'll see. So I think we're going to be able to leave it there, but we will be back this time next week, so we look forward to seeing everybody then. And have a fantastic week. Okay. Bye.